Welcome to Health is Wealth with Dr. Mike. I'm station manager Tina Cortez, and my co-host is Dr. Mike Carrozza. Good morning, Dr. Mike.
Good morning, Tina.
Spring, just about here.
It's coming.
Ready
it's here,
for a detox,
and I'm
you say?
excited. Aren't you? Well, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
spring cleaning doesn't
Yes.
mean just your house.
Okay.
Okay.
It
Our bodies
means-
need it. We need to cleanse. It's extremely important. There's a lot of reasons why, of course, but, we're going to talk about in this segment how turning up the heat can really help to detoxify.
What does that mean?
No pun intended.
Yeah.
So so basically, look, we have a lot of toxicities in our current environment. What are the sources of this? We have air pollution, which is a big problem. We have drinking water that is completely filthy, unfortunately. And then we have the whole GMO issue, the genetically modified organism issue, which is causing some really toxic loads in our body. And not only that, it's of course the herbicides, the pesticides, and this continual toxicity that's actually getting into our water streams. And then we have the whole heavy metal toxicity from things like certain types of fish.
So it sounds like we're doomed.
Listen, we're in a different world right now, and it's a big deal. But there is hope.
Right.
Look, I was at, so a lot of patients ask me where I shop. Of course, Nature's Emporium is where I go. But there are certain places I go to get fish. And I go right to the fish market, to be honest, and I don't go to these little places. So when I'm there, there's a big difference between, fish that is organic. So I was there and there was a fellow next to me and he was with his little granddaughter, it looked like, and he was looking for some fish because she only likes salmon and she'll only buy salmon. And so there's 4 types of salmon at the fish store. There's 4 types. One for $11.99 a pound, one for $13 or $14.99 a pound. Then it goes to like $17.99 a pound, then $19.99 a pound. And so I've done my research. And so the 3 lower price ones, there's really no difference because they're pretty much all farmed. And when you're dealing with the farmed salmon, you have to be very careful because not only is antibiotics being used with these fish, believe it or not, they're getting fed soy. Which is and they're getting fed genetically modified organisms. Gone is the thought about whatever the animal eats, it doesn't matter. So we are what we eat has eaten. Okay, so we have to be cognizant of what that animal is consuming because that's getting into us. All right. So basically, I shed some light on the fellow, and I said, look. I said, I know you're going for that $11.99 a pound, but that's farmed on the coast of wherever it is. Unfortunately, that's probably not a good option. And I was looking at the little girl and I'm thinking about my kids. And I'm like, this is something that you have to really, and there's a more ocean-wise sort of sustainable, organic, amazing corporation. And we're looking at this $19.99. I said, look, I know it's expensive, but you don't need so much. Have a little bit less. Have more vegetables and you're good. Because that's the idea. Right now we're dealing with this where we have to be cognizant of where these culprits are coming. A lot of people are getting sick, Tina. There's a lot of sickness out there and it's coming faster than ever. And we have to think outside the box and we have to think about the reasons and the causes about this. And if we look at our food source, which is our number one culprit, then we can actually have a fighting chance.
Now, can our bodies naturally eliminate some of these toxins ever?
Of course. So our body actually has an amazing ability. We're going to talk about this section because our body has an amazing ability to detoxify. But it's when we have to harness this. We have to put ourselves and put our bodies in the right place. So, of course, everybody goes through their Christmas time, their Easters, and their celebratory events. It's what you're doing on a daily basis is how you're going to keep your body in check. And so we talk about spring cleaning because this is the time for detoxification, especially when the change of season. This is where it's important. But most importantly is our body becomes a toxic overload as a result of us consuming a lot of things that otherwise we shouldn't be consuming. And it's what we do on an everyday basis. And it's not, let's say, the patient or the individual's fault, or for our listeners out there, it's not your fault. It's more society. And I believe that the nutritional, the sort of the deficiency or the devoid of nutrient, or the nutrient, there's no more density of nutrition inside food these days. And so with the advent of preservation and the kinds of foods that are really out there right now that have been really modified and processed is what I'm looking for. That's the term. And so you want to sort of be careful, because your body is continually detoxify. So if you're continually eating processed foods, fried foods, it's going to be hard for your body to continue to detox. So you want to just try to take a break from this. And I think this is the key, because it's this support that if you become prolonged in this, then your body is going to be weak. And if you start thinking about a lot of the illnesses, okay, and we'll talk about the different phases of detoxification, but if you think about looking at the different disease states, it's actually problems in the ability for detoxification. And I'm referring to, cancer. I'm referring to autoimmune diseases. I'm referring to Alzheimer's disease. There's really an inability for our body to metabolize these toxins and get them out of the body quick enough because of our constant exposure. So for our listeners out there, really, it's a great time to detoxify during season changes, but mostly how we can do this, and we're going to talk about it, and we're going to talk about what types of foods you can consume on a regular basis to help really ignite, if you will, ignite this detoxification process that we have built in all of us.
All right, when we come back, our detox conversation continues with some changes you can make around the house. This is Health is Wealth on 105.9 The Region. Stay with us. You're listening to 105.9 The Region, and welcome back to Health is Wealth with Dr. Mike. And Dr. Mike, a familiar voice and face to our show this week.
That's right, Tina. We welcome back Julie Daniluk, a registered holistic nutritionist and best-selling author of Meals That Heal Inflammation, and her most recent book, The Hot Detox. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Tina. It's
Another
such a pleasure.
great title, Julie. I love it.
Oh, thank you. And
Excellent.
It's interesting that hot detox really is fabulous for women who are going into menopause. So a lot of people think, hot detox, I can't hot detox.
I'm
Actually,
looking right at you.
Help you
It's gonna help.
with those hot flashes, because as we address the liver and we help to remove all that excess amount of toxicity, we actually balance our hormones and help us become more positive and more able to cope.
Love the book. I want to talk about detoxification predominantly and sort of how we can facilitate this. So let's talk about how detoxification is important and maybe what key things or recipes or foods that can help.
Well, the most important thing we can know about detoxification, as Tina mentioned, is a natural thing that our body can do when we give it the right raw materials.
Yes.
So we first up want to remember all the different organs that help us detoxify. Our skin is a major place we can detoxify, and heating ourselves up with saunas is scientifically proven to reduce overall mortality risk, because we can get rid of a lot of toxins and tough toxins, things like phthalates, things like heavy metals, we actually get rid of through our sweat. So that's a big piece of the book, is really teaching people about cleansing their skin, and then moving into really cleansing out your bowels. Opening your bowel first so that you're not constipated is one of the critical things, because 1 in 3 people are constipated, and we need to help you go, because otherwise you recycle your toxins. So we're going to increase the foods that help to move the actual toxins out. And then once the bowel is open, we can address the liver. And the liver's kind of the heavy lifter that's going to detoxify all the major chemicals out of the body. And then we also want to address the kidneys, of course, because the kidneys kind of do some heavy lifting when the liver is burdened. And we also want to really move toxins out of your lymph. Your lymph is like the roadside garbage collector who goes around and collects all the toxins from your tissues and pulls them out of your system. So when we address all these organ systems, which I walk you through one by one with really cool medical illustrations in the book, then you'll feel like, okay, I got this. And then we address the foods. And you wanted me to cover off all the foods. My goodness, where do I start? But we could go through the rainbow would be a good start.
That's a good start. I mean, before we get to that, I just, because I love what you just said, I want to reiterate this to people, because you mentioned 2 organ systems that I think are huge. First off, the skin is our largest organ. And this is where detoxification actually could get patients to the next level by detoxing things that otherwise they wouldn't be able to detox. So that this sauna, very important for our listeners, when you're going to be doing a sauna, you have to shower within minutes. or else you actually will reabsorb the toxins, Tina. This is important. So that's one thing I want to bring in terms of just the scientific literature, just because you know, I know a lot of people that sauna and then they basically just, you know, after the gym or they don't shower, and that's pretty much.
Is there another option for listeners who maybe don't have access to a sauna? What else could they do?
Did you know you can have a very hot bath? As long as we open the pores and break a sweat, you don't feel you're breaking a sweat because you're in the bath. But as long as you've got really good clean water, what I have done is actually installed a shower filter that removes the chlorine from my water, and then by putting in some nice essential oils in there and
Lavender.
like laying in that some nice lavender, you can really have some of the benefits that you would get. You just want to really heat
terrific.
yourself
Good
up
option.
and open up.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and another organ system that you mentioned is the lymphatic system. And our lymphatic system, just for our listeners, of course, our lymphatic system actually follows there. It's a separate, almost a separate, highway, if you will. It's a separate highway than the venous system. So the venous system, which is our blood system, which it's superimposed on that system, but it relies on musculature to sort of pump. So not like our vasculature, which actually has muscle built inside. Our lymphatic system, unfortunately, does not. So facilitating this through exercise and ways of detoxification is going to be key. But our toxins are sometimes stored there, and that's why our lymphatic drainage is a huge part of my practice, and obviously a lot of what we'd like to do. And I think something like dandelion tea is really good at really
Fantastic.
cleansing that system as well.
Yeah.
But, before we talk about this, I mean, you mentioned also about filtration and water, because that's our biggest toxin. And you wouldn't think bathing or taking a shower in a highly chlorinated environment is going to affect the body, but it's a huge impact.
Did you know that chlorine not only kills off your good bacteria so that you end up dropping your probiotics, but it also unfortunately disrupts our thyroid gland. With 1 in 3 women over the age of 35 having some hormonal impact to their thyroid, we have to remember that fluoride actually interferes with our iodine absorption. So it's really important for us to look at ways to knock out chlorine from our drinking water so that we can actually really boost our thyroid function.
And that's not only chlorine, that's also bromine. These are the halogens. These are these halogen formations. You're going to find them in swimming pools. You're going to find them in obviously hot tubs, and they're in our water system. So like a filtration, like you mentioned, is one way to sort of like fight back and reduce the amount of exposure, right? So very good pointers. I love it. So in terms of helping the detoxification process, drinking and having clean water is a big one, and avoid eating things like fast food. Right? That's a huge one. And then things like fried foods, right? I mean, these are big. And then I think the third one is processed foods. But there's also things like alcohol and coffee, right?
Yes, because alcohol and coffee both speed up phase 1 of our liver. And if we speed up phase 1 too fast, know that your liver has 2 phases, phase 1 and phase 2. Phase 2 slows down when you're nutrient deficient. So if you're deficient in vitamin B and your wonderful zinc and magnesium, it grinds to a halt. Phase 1 is running too fast because you've got alcohol and caffeine and pesticides and drugs on board. All of a sudden, I feel like we're Lucille Ball in the chocolate factory. We're like trying
to keep up
to figure out how we're going to run this crazy thing, but we cannot get the conveyor belt of toxins moving correctly because we're too toxic with all those heavy duty foods that speed up phase 1. So
there are, let's talk about this. So there are 3 phases of detoxification, right? So, I mean, the main phase, the main form of detoxification is you putting these soluble toxins into water soluble forms. And that's involving things like the liver, obviously the gut and the kidneys. The liver and the kidneys first do the work, and then the gut pretty much does the work later on. You mentioned that first off, right before we started, say, listen, get your gut primed, because there's no point of detoxing if you don't have the gut elimination. And we'll talk about that phase 3, but predominantly,
I just want to mention that as a naturopathic doctor, you must be seeing so many people who try to detox on their own, and they'll see those symptoms.
Exactly.
Where if they have help and they know that they have to prevent constipation, then it's safe to open the liver. But if you try to push the liver without the bowel being able to move the toxins out, And recirculating those toxins or leaving them in that intermediate phase is so dangerous.
100%. I think the first step when patients come into my practice is that, listen, let's get your gut fixed. And they're like, but hold on, I came with a skin issue. Why are you working on my gut? And it's like, you just told me that you haven't gone, like you can't go to the bathroom after 4 or 5 days. And you know, this is most females that come into my practice, and this is a concern, you know, because bowel movements are really important because it's a good indicator of the overall health of the individual.
Totally.
And so if you're trying to do these detoxifications or lack thereof, you're just constantly reabsorbing these toxins, hence why you'll come about with a skin issue, right? So that's the key. And so in terms of the phase 1, we definitely want to change these lipid soluble into water soluble. That's basically that phase, and there's certain foods that help this, right? What foods would help the more cruciferous vegetables, would you say?
Cruciferous veggies are fantastic for your liver, and they contain sulforaphane, and the sulfur in there is critically important for liver detoxification. Also, onions and garlic are wonderful sources for that as well. But there are also these really special compounds called isothiocyanates, which are spectacular for detoxification.
I love it.
Yeah.
And let's talk about why, right? Because a lot of those, you know, and then we're talking about the conjugation phase, which is the phase 2. And this is our manufacturer, if you will, of glutathione.
Yes, and glutathione is amazing. And the good news is what is the greatest form of glutathione in our menu? Guacamole.
Yes.
Oh, yum.
Avocados are an amazing source of naturally occurring glutathione.
And then so we want glutathione because
Yeah.
this is our mother detoxifier, if you will.
Yes.
This is this is where people are having an issue. And some people actually don't manufacture this, and we find this out in practice. And this is the critically ill patients that actually don't manufacture glutathione. They're lacking the genetic composition to actually methylate that will cause the methylation process, the folic acid to methylate or the methylcobalamin. And they sort of don't have that pathway. And so, you know, this is where, you know, I can help, of course, and we identify this, but in the meantime, that's a very small amount of patients that have this issue. But
I do think it's really worth mentioning that so many people think I'm just going to take a pill of vitamin B and I'm totally covered. But there's a ton of people who do not handle typical folic acid.
For sure.
And typical folic acid is actually causing them to have serious symptoms where they feel anxious, they feel really out of sorts. So if you're somebody who's like wondering why you don't feel good on supplementation, remember that natural folate, which is interesting because in Latin that's foliage. If you go to the plants that support the actual natural vitamin B9, you're going to feel so much better.
So much better.
So I love people eating more kale, more Swiss chard, all those dark leafy greens. If you don't want to eat it, drink it. I love the fact that Nature's Emporium has supplied this gorgeous organic fresh pressed juice. And that sort of really concentrated green stuff is going to give you some of the most important detoxification elements.
So let's
that
talk
will
about
lead
it.
us to phase 3 then, won't it? The elimination
Well,
part
that's
of
the
it?
whole point, right? The phase 3 is the elimination, and we want to prime the system before that. So it's not like you want to do 1 and 2 phases and then the detox, the final phase. You want to prime the first one. So let's talk about the Super Green Detox Machine. This particular product so let's talk about the foliage, if you will. So we got green kale, celery, pear, lemon, cayenne, mint, and some apple. I mean, you can't get more detoxification than this. I mean,
That's
it's not
beautiful.
hot. It's more cold press, but cold press is important, right, Julie?
Well, cold press doesn't mean it's freezing
Cheers.
cold. Thank you so much. It simply means that we haven't allowed the press to get so hot that it damages the product. So what I like about this is that by keeping that press cool, it means that we're able to keep all those good B vitamins from oxidizing, which is why this juice is extra special, and it will stay really fresh in its container 2 or 3 times longer than if you use a conventional juice press.
And then when you think about the amount of water people need to drink in order to detox, right? Because, I mean, we talked about sauna. We talked about, like, let's make a note about how important is water and clean water.
You know how everyone says you need 8 glasses of water a day? They've now increased that to 11 glasses for women and 14 glasses for men. And I know Tina's shaking her head.
Yes.
But I will say, don't worry. Tea counts. These sort of wonderful, healthy things count.
Okay.
Soup counts. So we just need a lot of liquid to help your kidneys flush your toxins out of your system, so you don't have the burden falling only on your bowels, because you become constipated when you're dehydrated.
Okay.
So definitely keep those systems moving.
Yes, and let's talk about, in terms of the bowels, we need two things to facilitate this. We can get natural probiotics,
So
and
important.
then fiber. Right. Let's talk
Yes.
about the fiber connection,
Sure.
the prebiotic and the probiotic. Maybe you can give some
Exactly.
examples.
I would love that. So my favorite fibers that are extremely soothing and healing for the digestive system include chia seed, flax seed, psyllium seed. These are very healing seeds that we notice amazing improvements in bowel mobility. So by having a bulk, it works like a broom that sweeps the toxins out of your system, which is really lovely. Really high in soluble fiber, which is so much harder, it's so much easier on your system than, say, the roughage of, say, wheat bran. So people eat more wheat bran thinking, I'm just going to push it all out. But unfortunately, if that irritates you, that causes constipation. So that's where I'm saying in the book, hey, are you sensitive to gluten and you don't realize it? And maybe you need to move from aggressive fibers to gentle fibers. And that's why I really love the flax and the chia ground, because it's much easier in your gut.
And that comes right back to my forte on the enrichment of omega-3s, which are both elevated with these. How do you think about, do you like hemp seeds as well?
I love hemp hearts.
Okay,
Hemp
so 'cause
hearts,
you know-
that inner kernel of the hemp seed is all through the Hot Detox. There's probably
Good.
40 recipes because they're so high in omega-3 and magnesium and amazing rich amounts of iron. So nutritious.
And it will lay down, if you will, the foundation for the growth of beneficial bacteria.
Yes.
And so this becomes a prebiotic as well. So it's like almost like a dual role, like you have, or like a triple role, if you will. So you have this bulking forming that's going to allow for the passage of your bowels. You're going to get the omega-3s as well. And then now you're going to fuel the growth of beneficial bacteria, because the whole point of taking things like probiotic or, kefir. Are you a fan?
Well, the thing with kefir, dairy is such a big issue, but the coconut kefir that's
what I
coming
meant.
out, it's amazing. Yeah.
Which is a non-dairy component,
Yeah.
because there's so many allergies out there, and of course dairy is a big one, and it causes a lot of things like inflammation on a lot of patients. So for sure, so taking a probiotic but you can buy a human strain that's dairy-free, right? Because I think a lot of misconception is probiotics contain dairy. Right?
Yeah, we actually teach people how to make their own yogurt in the book using a probiotic supplement. So you crack the supplement open, stick it in some coconut yogurt or coconut milk, and let it ferment
on its own. So you're making like this own kefir.
Yeah.
Wow, that's great. That's
really
wonderful.
fun.
And then that's the idea, laying down this framework to allow this probiotic to become established and continue to flourish within your gut.
Yes.
And then, in terms of the detoxification, I like, since we're on this point, I love artichoke, and I know you do too. So first of all, I know you got like an amazing dip, and I think it's on your website, or is it in the book?
It's actually coming in my next book.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay,
Sorry.
but not a worry. We will absolutely say I have 3 or 4 amazing artichoke recipes in here.
So let's talk about artichoke itself.
Yes.
Of course, it'll stimulate things like the bile. It'll help with, but let's talk about the detoxification. What's it good for?
Well, know that it does, by promoting bile flow, it actually increases the elimination of toxicity, because bile is the exit point from the liver. That's what carries the toxins out of your system. So when we increase bile flow, we really do help with detoxification. But there's another magic trick that artichokes provide that we just have to mention, which is the fact that it plays a trick on your tongue. It actually changes your taste receptors so that everything you eat right after artichokes tastes sweet, which is so important for people who are worried about food. They need extra sugar on their grapefruit, for example. So for a narrow window after you eat that artichoke, the water you're sipping is going to taste like you put sugar in it. The food that you're eating, like a salad dressing, is going to taste like you put sugar in the salad dressing. It's so cool. So do increase artichokes, because it's going to increase your bowel movements. It's going to increase your liver detoxification, and it's going to really increase your ability to eat those natural.
Let's talk about top 3 foods that are good for detoxification.
Well, certainly we would want to focus on, I'm trying to think of a food we haven't talked about yet. My goodness, there's so
lemon.
Lemon is amazing. Thank you. Lemon, of course, is rich in bioflavonoids, which are called vitamin P, and vitamin P carries vitamin C into your system and helps your liver work better.
And then, so
throw out your favorite foods and we'll just talk about those.
we'll just throw out I mean, we mentioned, let's talk about what will shut off the detoxification, because a lot of people, I want to talk about grapefruit and the turning off of the detoxification.
Sure. So grapefruit and turmeric actually slow down phase 1 of your liver detox pathways. So as long as you're not on any serious medications, you can use those foods to help balance out your liver detox pathways.
And so just be careful if you're consuming this while you're doing a detox, and it does interact with certain drugs as well. So it's important. And so this just turns off the cytochrome P450, which is an enzymatic. Yep. And so anyways, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Oh my goodness.
This is awesome. Folks, if you don't have her latest book, The Hot Detox, you need to get it, because this book will really help you. It's got some amazing recipes in here.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming on the show.
It's great, Dr. Mike.
It's been lovely.
Thanks, Tina.
And Julie, one more time, where can our listeners connect with you and find Hot Detox?
At Julie Daniluk, DANILUK. And I'm that way on all social media. You just find me at Julie Daniluk and juliedaniluk.com. And you can also go to hotdetox.com.
That's terrific. Thank you. Come back anytime. And Dr. Mike, just before we wrap up the show, if our listeners want to connect with you and your team at AppleMed, how can they do that?
So www.applemed.ca, 905-417-4000 is our number. You can actually come by, drop by our clinic for a tea, 3560 Rutherford Road. We're here in Vaughan. We're on Instagram at AppleMed Clinic. Watch this video and many others on IGTV, and thank you for listening.
That's terrific. Go by for a tea. That's our show for this week. If you missed any part of Health is Wealth, go to our website, 1059theregion.com. Thanks for listening.